You don't send two carrier groups. And I've been to these carrier groups. You're talking about massive military power armadas. You don't move them there unless you intend to use them in some way. Because if you don't use them, it's even worse. And it's like taking out the pistol. If you're not willing to shoot it, don't take out the pistol. And remember, America is a superpower. It has a global perspective. And the message there is not just to Iran and Hezbollah. The message there is to Russia, to China. It's about Ukraine. It's about Taiwan. It's about the South China Sea. It's about many things. This is Joe Biden taking on the one issue in Washington which achieves bipartisan support, which is isolationism. He's basically saying to the world that America is back. If Hezbollah opens up with 150,000 rockets at us, and many of them are accurate, they can take out our essential facilities, our utilities, our airfields, our oil refineries, our Dimona reactor, okay? Those aircraft carriers are gonna launch. And it's not just planes, it's Tomahawk missiles, it's Aegis systems, they're an arsenal in themselves, they're armies. So you ask me, is there a chance? Yeah, there's a chance. I can't assign a probability to it, but I would actually say hi. We have woken up to a different world. We are in a very different world right now. We don't know. We know how the war started. We have no idea how it ends.
It is October 21st at 8 a.m. here in New York City. It's 5 p.m. in Israel as Shabbat winds down there in a couple of hours. Here are the latest developments from Israel. The New York Times reports this morning that Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, supported a preemptive strike on Hezbollah in the north. President Biden and his aides advised Israel to avoid a widening war with the Hezbollah strike. This follows on a lot of reporting that occurred in the Hebrew language Israeli press earlier in the week about war cabinet deliberations. And this news comes 24 hours after the largest city in Israel's north, Kiryat Shmona, has been ordered to evacuate. The United Nations says that beginning this morning in Israel, a 20-truck convoy carrying, quote, life-saving supplies has entered Gaza from Egypt. Yesterday, 2 Israeli-American hostages were released after negotiations between the government of Qatar and Hamas. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said on Friday that Israel has set out 3 phases of war and that it will seek a new, quote, security regime once Hamas is vanquished. Gallant emphasized that Israel is still engaging in phase 1 of this plan, which relies largely on airstrikes, and the second phase will include lower-intensity ground attacks as troops work to eliminate pockets of resistance. Pressures to restrain Israel's offensive into Gaza are building up, both from the international community and even to some degree from within Israel, by families of the hostages who are getting increasingly organized and making their voices heard. We will discuss the latest developments and take a broader look at the October 7th war, including a historical look, with our guest today, historian and former diplomat and member of Knesset, Michael Oren. But first, some observations. Since October 7th, I've been bouncing an idea around with some smart Israeli friends and some military historians over there. In short, we've been discussing the October 7th war has been comparable to Israel's Yom Kippur War of 1973, in which Israel was surprised by conventional armies from surrounding Arab countries. This comparison has been all over in the press. Obviously, it seems that the October 7th war was actually timed to the 50-year anniversary of the humiliation of the Yom Kippur War. Israel had a disastrous first couple of weeks in that war, but then Israel not only recovered quickly militarily, but demonstrated that it could have reached Cairo and Damascus if it wanted to. The military defeat of Egypt and Egypt's restoration of its honor by attacking Israel in the first place allowed Anwar Sadat to make peace with Israel. Indeed, Itamar Rabinovich, an historian who's written extensively about Syria and also about the 1973 Yom Kippur War, who was later an Israeli ambassador to Washington under the premiership of Yitzhak Rabin, has made this point, that for all that went wrong with the 1973 war, it did lay the groundwork for Israel's Camp David Accords with Egypt. It is also noteworthy that as awful as those first couple of weeks were in the Yom Kippur War, few Israeli civilians were killed. So this October 7th war of 2023 feels very different. In this 2023 war, Israel was attacked by the much weaker of the Iranian proxies on its borders. It wasn't like big conventional armies of Egypt and Syria came in for Israel. There are basically two Iranian proxies on Israel's borders. There's Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north. And it was Hamas, as I said, the weaker of the two, rather than Hezbollah from the north, or even both simultaneously, that attacked Israel on October 7th. And while the Hamas terrorists seemed to be well trained and armed, they invaded Israel on motorcycles and pickup trucks, using small drones, explosives, and a bulldozer. And yet, they were able to slaughter and torture and burn alive and rape over 1,000 Israeli civilians. They were able to overrun military bases. They were able to occupy a lot of territory with the Israeli military nowhere in sight for a long time. They were even able to travel back and forth to Gaza more than once, taking almost 250 hostages with them. This time, in 2023, the perception, at least over the course of that horrendous weekend, was it was Israel that looked to be the paper tiger. It means nothing to be a regional superpower if that power can't protect its citizens. In the Yom Kippur War, Israel was surprised, but not weak. This time, does Israel look weak to its enemies in the region, to its friends in the region, to countries it has been warming relations with? In a sense, the October 7th massacre tried to stab at the heart of Zionism. When I speak to friends in Israel, and I even speak to Jewish friends in the diaspora around the world, there's this sense that October 7th returned all of us to fears of vulnerability from earlier eras in Jewish history, from Kishinev, pogroms, and the Shoah, to a time when Jews could be slaughtered with impunity because Israel didn't exist. But today, Israel does exist, and that is why this October 7th war is so crucial, to remind the Jewish people, to remind Israel's friends and allies, to remind Israel's future friends and allies, and to remind Israel's enemies that Israel does exist. To put these events in historical context, I wanted to talk to my friend Ambassador Michael Oren, who has written one of the best military histories I've ever read. It's called 6 Days of War, June 1967, and the Making of the Modern Middle East. Another one of my favorites, by Michael, Power, Faith, and Fantasy, America in the Middle East, 1776 to the present. But Michael is not just an academic about military and political power. Having served in the paratroopers and the IDF, he served in various roles over the course of a number of Israeli wars after making Aliyah, after moving to Israel. Later on, he served as Israel's ambassador to the United States and is a member of Knesset and deputy minister in the Prime Minister's office. He is a graduate of Princeton and Columbia and was a visiting professor at Harvard, Yale, and Georgetown. Now, this conversation we have with Michael touches on the directions this war could go in the near future, including his bold prediction that the U.S. will get involved, or at least more involved than I expect. And this will be part of a series of conversations we'll be having in the coming days, including one tomorrow we're having with Matthew Levitt about the potential for a northern front opening up one way or the other. Michael Oren, forecasting the war's path ahead. This is Call Me Back. And I'm pleased to welcome to this podcast for the first time my longtime friend, Ambassador Michael Oren, who joins us from his bomb shelter, actually, in South Tel Aviv, in Jaffa. Michael is playing a number of roles right now in this horrific time in Israel, but one of which is helping people like me stay informed. So, Michael, thanks for being here.
Dan, always an honor. Thank you. I'd like to say it was a pleasure, but you really can't talk about pleasure in the same breath with what's going on here.
I know. It's right. That's exactly how I feel. So, Michael, we're speaking right now just after news of release or expected release of 2 American hostages by Hamas. A, what can you tell us about it? And B, what does it mean?
Well, I have a personal angle on it. During my day job, in the couple hours I have free in the day, I go try to visit families of the hostages, and the 203 families, 100 hostages, are basically kept in the dark. The security services and other volunteers working with AI have gotten some information, but it really is dependent on films that were made by various angles that they can dissect and find out who was alive, who was not alive. I visited a family yesterday, the Eshel family, a young family of a young soldier, and they have no evidence to date whether their daughter Roni is alive or not, or whether she was taken hostage. So it's not everybody who has that. I visited another family a couple of days ago, the Shem family. Their daughter Mia is a joint French-Israel citizen, and sort of miraculously, the next morning, Hamas released a video of her daughter.
This was the video where she's talking. She has the bandages on her arm.
Yeah, that's family. And yesterday, I hope that we were able to facilitate the mother to travel to France to meet with French President Macron about this. But Hamas, the bottom line is Hamas is very clever. Hamas is releasing footage about a French-Israeli citizen in a way to impact French public opinion. It's the way the Hamas says to the French, listen, all those reports you heard about beheading and raping and murder and maim and dissecting human beings, that's not really us. This is the real us. We are compassionate. We take care of this young woman. We stitch up her arm. We're feeding her and release this video. By the way, the video was old. It wasn't made on the same day. So we actually don't know
really?
the status of this woman. And then this morning, I spend my nights interviewing, as you know, on various international, mostly American stations. I'll be on tonight, almost till morning. This morning, around 5:30 in the morning, I was on MSNBC, and as you know, the narrative has changed, and it's changing very rapidly. To put it in the most pedestrian way I can, certain numbers of dead Jews buy you certain number of days or even minutes of grace. And we are rapidly expanding, getting to the end of our grace.
It's like Dara Horn's book, everybody loves dead Jews.
Yeah. But even dead Jews only buy you so much grace, as we know in, say, Europe's relationship with Israel after the Holocaust. It bought us about 25 years. So we are getting to the end of that grace period. And it begins in Europe. It actually begins with the BBC and the London Times, though you already saw early intimations of it with the New York Times already a week ago, where it stops being about the dead Jews and starts being about Palestinian suffering. And the MSNBC segment was about Palestinian suffering, a very long segment about what's going on with the children of the refugees in southern Gaza. And I turned to my partner, Tammy, and I said, off camera, I said, this is going to be rough. Just watch this. And then I came on with the panel discussion, and then the panel was Martin Fletcher. Now, Martin Fletcher is a very celebrated Middle Eastern journalist, has 5 Emmys. I know he has so many different awards, and very acute observer, and often a very critical observer of Israel. So I've known him, and I've sometimes locked horns with him, but I think we have a mutually respectful relationship. But I fully expected this whole segment of MSNBC to be about Palestinian suffering and Israel's responsibility for it. And then Martin, in the middle of his remarks, mentioned that his relatives, this Judith and Natalie Ra'anan, were taken hostage. And in the middle of the broadcast, he broke down and cried, and actually couldn't stop crying. And my many years in the media, I've never had an experience like this. And we all stopped, and it was, we're all teary. And then we learn, 20 hours later, that Hamas has released Judith and Natalie. Now, if you ask me, their release was directly related to this broadcast. It's high profile. And that broadcast was repeated, went sort of viral, and Hamas saw an opportunity. Hamas saw an opportunity to make a finer and wider point than they had made with the release of the footage about Mia Kam, the French woman. And now this is all
which is quote unquote a kindler, gentler Hamas, or at least kindler, gentler relative to its portrayal over the last 10 days, because as some analysts have pointed out, Hamas was taken aback by the global reaction to not only its barbarism, but the hostages, and that they've kind of gotten themselves in a jam now with these hostages. That's the characterization. So they're looking for ways to show that they can be compassionate.
It's only because they're not they're not on your alma mater's campus.
Right.
They'd be very happy to see
Yeah.
what's happening. No, their actual statement said this. I don't have to spell it out. They said this shows this exposed the lies of the fascist Biden. That was their response tonight of their spokesman who bade it. So they're explaining to you what they're doing, but it's cleverer than that, Dan. It's this. Martin Fletcher, I was on again with him tonight about an hour ago. And
Martin Fletcher, just for our listeners, Michael, just for people who, he is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. He was NBC Middle East correspondent, Israel-based Middle East correspondent for years. I mean, he was really a fixture for
many
decades,
and,
really.
I have the highest regard for him. We don't agree on everything, but the highest regard for him. And tonight, he first of all, was very excited, as much as an Englishman can be excited on TV, and he openly called on Israel not to invade. This is the opportunity to engage in negotiations that will result in the release of hostages, and calling for a ceasefire. And guess what? Hamas's gambit paid off. It hit bullseye. You can't get any better than that on a national TV station. A very prominent journalist calling for a ceasefire, and now it complicates Israel's decision making. I don't think it's going to change Israel's decision making.
But why? Why does it complicate Israel's decision making?
Because now, when we invade, and I assume we're going to invade, we are now going to purposely undermine chances for rescuing the hostages, including the American hostages.
Mm-hmm. And on the flip side, if there are more American hostages, we understand there are something like 15 American hostages.
Something like that. We don't know for certain.
If they were to release all, there was talk that there was a negotiation. Again, this is all speculative, but
there was talk with the Qataris.
Yeah, the Qataris were going to get the U.S. passports out and the U.K. passports out.
Right.
If they were successful in that, it sounds like that's unlikely. But if they were successful in that, what kind of message does that send about the Israeli passports that are still being held? It's almost, there are different gradations of value of human life, and those holding Israeli passports, Israeli Jews, their lives are more expendable?
Well, it's Entebbe Redux. Poor Hamas probably found out that all these people who have foreign citizenship are probably also Jewish as well.
Right.
Poor Hamas. Otherwise, they would have made the same selection and released.
So can you describe, just for our listeners, what happened in Entebbe for people who don't know the reference you're making about how they divided people up?
Well, they divided Entebbe in July 1976 when a combination of German and Palestinian terrorists hijacked an Air France airliner to Entebbe in Uganda. They immediately separated the hostages on the basis of who was Jewish and who was non-Jewish. These German terrorists basically did a selection, and the IDF was sent to rescue them. It was Benjamin Netanyahu's brother Yoni was the commander of that operation, and he fell in the operation. He was the only Israeli soldier killed. So he became legendary. But that notion of separating the hostages between Jews and non-Jews is emblazoned in our collective memory here. And it's not so dissimilar what happened here. I mean, Judith and Natalie are Jewish. They're very Jewish. And from what I understand, reading about them, they're actually observant Jews. So it's saying that it's trying to drive a wedge between Israel and its allies. It is trying to point the finger at Israel, put the onus of the responsibility for the fate and survival of these hostages squarely in Israel's lap, in our lap. And I saw how it worked. It worked like clockwork. What did I say?
Do you think the conundrum of how to deal with the hostages is what has been the source of the delay for the IDF moving in?
Not entirely. I think there are efforts to locate them. The big problem with the hostages is finding where they are. And assuming they're still in Gaza, most of them are in the hands of Hamas, but not all.
And isn't that part of the problem, that they're not all in the hands of Hamas? So Hamas itself doesn't even know where they all are.
Hamas doesn't know where they are. So 30 at least are in the hands of Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And then we have families who took hostages, families who crossed the border, took hostages, and bring them back. If you remember Gilad Shalit, over a decade ago, he was not taken by Hamas. He was taken by a family and sold to Hamas. Those of you who maybe remember, the English patient, right? He gets captured by a Bedouin family and sold to the British. So we have, stranger than fiction. So these families have their family hostage, and they want to make money out of it. So We don't know. Hamas doesn't know entirely. So the big obstacle for us, and the big obstacle is locating. We couldn't locate Gilad Shalit for 5 years. The Lord, we tried. So they're underground, maybe in these infinite warrens, these labyrinths that Hamas has dug underneath Gaza. It'll be difficult. They serve first and foremost as a human shield. They are the next shield, actually a stronger shield than the outer shield of the Palestinian civilians, because the world is going to care deeply about the safety of Palestinian civilians, but it's going to care profoundly, and from Israel's perspective, they're going to care prohibitively about hostages if they are foreign nationals. It won't be easy for Israel's internal dynamics either. There's already protests of the families demanding that the hostages be released now. Well, how else can you release now without reaching some type of ceasefire with Hamas and letting them get away with mass murder? If I may take a bit of a detour here and just say a word about why Israel has to invade Gaza. Because it's not clear to everybody. And this is if I have to ask the most frequently asked question I'm getting in the international media, why do we have to do it? Why don't you just, you've already killed more than twice as many Palestinians as you lost in October 7th and 8th. You've bloodied them terribly. You've displaced 1 million people. Isn't that enough? Why do you have to go in there? By the way, you're going to lose a lot of people too. And the hostages are liable not to survive. There's many, compelling reasons. You read the columns in the New York Times and elsewhere, that is basically the narrative. And what they are overlooking, because they're not Israeli, are the 3 key reasons why we have to invade Gaza. One has to do with simply the security, is restoring security to the South. The South, as we say, is 62% of Israel. Going back to status quo ante will mean that nobody will live there anymore. It will become virtually uninhabitable. Would you move your family down to Nahal Oz now in Barry?
Right.
If you went back to status quo ante?
Even farther north than that.
Okay. And so ultimately the entire country becomes uninhabitable. All happens. So that's A. B, restoring our deterrence power. Our deterrence power right now is zero. You asked me before we were off screen, is Israel is more vulnerable now than it was? And the answer categorically is yes. All right. Is that we are, and that the world that we woke up to on October 7th was fundamentally different than the world we woke up to on October 6th. October 6th was a world in which Israel could defend itself by itself against any Middle East enemy or any combination of Middle East adversaries. It was we felt secure, and we felt there's threats from Hamas and threats from Hezbollah, but nothing remotely like this. Very different, and we're dependent on the United States in the way that who would have imagined we'd be dependent like that? There are people in Israel who are disturbed by it, are threatened by it, but that is reality. I don't see anybody in Israel telling these 2 aircraft carriers, the Ford and the Eisenhower, hey, we don't need you, go home. Nobody's saying that then. Okay. That's the second reason. And the third, and I think that is the paramount reason, is that Israel needs to fix the covenant between the state and the people. And what was the covenant? This country was founded 3 years almost to the date to the end of the Holocaust, in May 1948. It was based on a promise. And that promise was this state was going to protect the Jewish people from a recurrence of the Holocaust. Never again. It wasn't just a vow, it was a promise. And the state violated the promise. The state was not there to protect the people of Israel. Not only did it not detect the invasion of Hamas, it took hours and hours and hours to respond to it. Breakdown of intelligence, everything. So there is a crisis in the relationship between the people and the state, and that has to be corrected. And we cannot begin to restore that covenant under the shadow of Hamas warheads. Can't do that. It'll always be there to remind us of the failure of the state.
Michael, you on the hostage issue, and then I want to go back to a little bit of history here because you are a historian. Do you think Hamas intended by the end of October 7th to have 200 plus Israelis as hostages on the other side of its border? I
don't think in their wildest dreams. I thought they probably wanted a significant military victory. They didn't necessarily want this.
What happened? I mean, so you're saying that they were more successful than they anticipated, and suddenly they get to the other side of the border and they're like, oh my gosh, we have all these people. I mean, it was a miscalculation.
I think they overestimated our abilities to defend ourselves. All right. They were guilty of the same preconception that we were. I have a couple of hats. Okay, so one of the hats is the historian's hat, and I also fought in Gaza, so I have the soldier's hat. But for about a year and a half, when I was in government, one day the prime minister called me in and said, "I got bad news for you. You're in charge of Gaza." And I learned more in that year and a half about the Middle East than I did in many, many years in university. And
when was this? What years?
This was in 2018, 19.
Got it.
And what I learned was the following. Everything you know about human decency, everything you know about normal, quote-unquote, behavior, about civilization, when it comes to Hamas and Gaza, throw it out the window. It's irrelevant. This is an organization that takes hundreds of Palestinian kids every year, sends them down tunnels to dig tunnels, and hundreds are killed. The tunnels collapse. They don't care. I was in charge of the Keren Shalom crossing, which is translates ironically as the grape. What's it called? The vineyard of peace. Yeah, right. Keren Shalom, and we had a capacity there of 1,200 huge flatbed trucks that could bring in everything: food, medicine. The blockade. A lot of misinformation about the blockade. The blockade was only about arms and dual-use items like irrigation pipes that can be used in projectiles, and they all were. That's why there's no water in Gaza. Hamas took all the pipes to make them into rockets. Hamas would only let 400 trucks in because Hamas liked maintaining a humanitarian crisis that would keep the people dependent on Hamas and keep them angry at us. I learned that Iran was willing to fight Israel to the last Palestinian, and Mahmoud Abbas in Judea and Samaria and Ramallah was willing to fight Hamas to the last Israeli. Really, everything you know about reality is thrown out the window. And so that these terrorists could act in a way, I don't think it's rivaled by any act in history. I can't think of it. Because our defense minister, Yoav Gallant, a friend, compared them to animals and was lambasted in the world. You're dehumanizing the Palestinians. No, we're not dehumanizing. We're actually giving them credit. Animals would never do this, right? There's no animal on earth that would do what these people did to another human being. So this is what I learned about Hamas and Gaza, and that there is really no other response than to try our best to uproot them and to extirpate them in every possible way.
So I want to compare this, Michael. Again, just you're a historian. You've written a number of books. One of the most important was your book on the 6-Day War. But I want to. You and I were talking previously before we were on the podcast about the Yom Kippur War, because the Yom Kippur War was the closest up until now, I think, that Israel felt a real existential threat. And it's true that in the Yom Kippur War, Israel was surprised by Arab armies, which together were, at least on paper, a match for Israel, if not stronger. But Israel recovered, and not only recovered, it quickly demonstrated that it could have reached Cairo and Damascus if it wanted to, and including surrounding the entire Egyptian Third Army, and Egypt and Syria essentially had to beg Israel for peace. So it was like Egypt and Syria that ultimately looked like the paper tiger. And during that war, it was brutal for Israel's army, but Israeli civilians were never really under threat. And this seems like the opposite. It feels to me like Israel now looks like the paper tiger, and Israeli civilians were really under threat, and the equivalent of, proportionately like 40,000. It would be the equivalent of 40,000 Americans being killed in a single weekend.
I've heard 52 is the exact number.
52,000. So the numbers keep changing.
Yeah.
And it begs the question, to your point, like, who is the IDF? Who's the Israeli Defense Forces defending if this could happen? So I'm just curious, comparing this moment to the Yom Kippur War in terms of Israel's vulnerability.
Well, I think you've basically said it. The Yom Kippur War was fought between armies, planes, tanks, people in uniform. For the most part, it was far from any population center. Only on the first day of the war did Syrians come close to, Safed and Tiberias, but they never actually got there. They never descended from the Golan Heights. And so, the civilian losses in that war were minimal. I'm actually hard-pressed to think of any. And yes, the war ended in a conventional way with the Egyptian Third Army completely surrounded and with Israeli artillery within range of Damascus, as you said. So militarily, by the way, in American military academies, they don't study the Six-Day War. They studied the 1973 Yom Kippur War as a much more interesting military victory. Americans are used to.
And why is that?
Well, Americans are used to coming from behind, whether it be Fort Sumter or Pearl Harbor. We're used to it. Okay, we lost the first one, but look how it ended up. I mean, who thinks of the Civil War, World War II being a loss? Only in Israel we think of the Yom Kippur War being a loss because we started off at a loss. It's our shtick, okay? It's our shtick. And it's not just a shtick. We lost almost 2,700 soldiers in 3 weeks, which was prohibitive. It was a much smaller country back then. But having said that, we maintained our deterrence power to such a degree that the Egyptians internalized that even with the maximum amount of surprise and advantages in men and materiel, they still could not defeat us. And the Syrians, in sort of way, internalized that. Well, we have never faced a serious conventional threat since then. But Hamas operates according to an entirely different, it's not even cost-benefit. It's entirely different logic or illogic. When I was preparing to go into that job as being in charge of Gaza, I was the guest of our internal security, the Shabak, in the south for a day. And they began their talk to me by showing me a picture of Ismail Haniyeh, one of the commanders, major commanders of Hamas, and he was standing in a jalabiyah on a pile of rubble, and he was giving a victory sign, V sign. And the head of the Shabak says to me, Is that a picture of defeat or a picture of victory? And being a good American background, I said, well, it's defeat. He's standing on a pile of rubble. He said, no. That's victory. Because Hamas doesn't care how much rubble there is. If they're still standing on it and giving the V sign, they won. So you have to throw out everything you know and go into the world of Hamas. We can devastate Gaza right now. If there's a single Hamas cell there still breathing, they've won. That's the way they're going to look at it. And by the way, it's going to happen because there are about 150,000 members of Hamas. We can't kill them all.
How do you respond to the critique that Israel going into Gaza, extirpating Hamas, most of Hamas, will inevitably leave some kind of vacuum in this territory? Shouldn't Israel have a plan for what a post-Hamas Gaza looks like before it goes in and eviscerates Hamas?
I damn well hope so. I really do. I've said this now for years because I've been involved in the Gaza diplomacy and the Gaza battles. I participated in some of these operations, and that is we don't seem to have an end game, and that the end game could be that we're left holding the keys to Gaza, and we don't want to be holding those keys. I mean, there's some people on the sort of the far right that want to rebuild the Israeli settlements there, but they're not many, and then the whole process will come again because people forget that before the disengagement, we were losing a number of soldiers and a number of civilians every week in Gaza.
Mm-hmm. So pre-2005.
Before 2005, yeah. So that whole process would start again. So I hope so. And I hope that we are engaged in an intimate discussion with our American allies, with our Arab friends, maybe some type of inter-Arab force. The big issue, and I saw that Netanyahu related to it tonight, was whether the PA, the Palestinian Authority from Judea and Samaria, from Ramallah, will be involved in the revival of Gaza.
And pre-2007, the PA, the Palestinian Authority, was governing over Gaza before they got driven out by Hamas.
With the disengagement in 2005, we actually gave it to the PA. The PA was able to hold on to it for 2 years, before they were ousted by a Hamas coup, and ousted in the literal sense, because there were hundreds of PA police officers who were cast off the top of roofs in Gaza by Hamas, killed, hunted down and killed. So, yes, and if you put the PA in there, A, how do you keep the PA from the same thing happening again? But B, what does that mean in terms of the peace process? Are we back? There's a certain school of thought, and I think that Netanyahu accedes to this school of thought, he subscribes to it, is that you divide the Palestinians, keep them divided, keep them fighting one another, and that lessens the chance of having to get into a peace process, which we're going to have to give up territory and maybe uproot citizens and endanger our state by creating a Palestinian state both in Gaza and the West Bank, which could implode just the way Gaza imploded now. And then we'd have this type of war on both sides. By the way, I'm sitting in Jaffa. You're in my bomb shelter. But if I looked out the window to my left on a clear day, I see the hills of Hebron. And if there were a Palestinian state in those hills, I wouldn't be in rocket range. I'd be in rifle range. And so it's not just an ideological argument there. And I think a lot of Israelis now are of that opinion. So that's a big question. The morning after, there's got to be a morning after, and as the old song goes.
But the plan for the morning after cannot hold up. It sounds like the need for momentum and going in.
No, should not. I think there are other clocks. Israel has different clocks. One of the clocks is getting the Palestinian civilians out of the war zone. And here's my army hat, okay? Because I fought there. You do not want to be a soldier in Gaza. It is a labyrinth of alleyways, cul-de-sacs, all of them heavily mined, booby-trapped, enfiladed with crisscrossing fire, and underneath it is the major battlefield. It's the tunnels and the bunkers. We're talking about dozens and dozens and dozens of miles of these bunkers, bunkers that go under schools, under hospitals. You got to fight in this environment. Think about this. It's a nightmare. And so that, first of all, is gathering intelligence to the degree that we have intelligence. It's trusting our intelligence because our last round of intelligence didn't do so well. Trying to find out where the hostages are. So that's one clock. The other clock is the clock I deal with, is the changing of the international narrative, which is going to lead in the end to pressure. It's already starting. I saw it on MSNBC tonight. Our enemy does not have a military strategy. Our enemy has a military tactic that serves a media, a diplomatic, and legal strategy. What does it mean? They get these horrible pictures coming out of Gaza, okay? That they shoot at us, they kill us, and then they get us to kill them. They're Palestinian things. That's what they want. That's why Hamas is trying to prevent civilians from leaving the battle area. They want us to kill them. And so that generates horrible pictures around the world. That, in turn, puts pressure on governments. That pressure then finds expression in the Security Council, which is going to vote to impose a ceasefire. And then the legal stage is we end up in The Hague being accused of war crimes and boycotted and sanctioned. That's what they want. I mean, Hamas knows they can't destroy us with even attacks like October 7th. They can't destroy us, but they can deny us the right to defend ourselves and deny us the right to exist. And that's what they're going for. They're very methodical about it. So we have that clock. We cannot wait forever while this pressure builds against us. And it is ticking. I'm hearing it all the time. The last is the question of the 360,000 reservists who've been called up. Now, this is, you get a sense of 360,000 soldiers. It's basically 1 out of every 10 Israelis in uniform tonight. And it's a force that's more than twice as large as the British and French armies combined. But it's also our most productive segment of our population. These are young people in the 20s and the 30s. This is the high-tech sector.
I was on the phone this morning with, I won't mention his name, but one of those prominent venture capitalists in the Israeli tech scene, who's walking me through his portfolio companies and just pointing out, the senior leadership of these companies, these entrepreneurs, these founders are people who are reserves, people who are in the reserves as pilots, 8200, the well-known high-tech unit. He just started going through unit after unit after unit. These, Sayeret Matkal, obviously. These are the people getting called up. So something like 10+% of the senior ranks of most of his portfolio companies are not working.
Yeah.
They're defending the country, but they're not working, building their companies. Wow. Some of these companies are in the middle of fundraising rounds. They've got, critical milestones to meet. Obviously, in the scheme of life, they pale in comparison to the work that these reservists are going to be doing on the front lines. However, the tech economy is the lifeblood of Israel's economy,
and we're hemorrhaging.
Right.
So, and we don't want to bleed out. To carry the metaphor. That's and so there's a limited amount of time we can keep our soldiers mobilized at this level. There are other clocks. I don't know how much time we have to go through. It's what I call the Farkhana clock. Farkhana is a village in southern Lebanon where twice, in 1996 and again in 2006, an Israeli shell hit civilians, killed many, many of them, and it generated immediate crisis and ended the war. And, we I don't want to sound in any way cavalier about it, but we dodged a missile this week with that hospital. Because if it had been an Israeli bomb on that hospital, it might have changed a lot of our ability and our maneuverability to mount this incursion. It didn't happen, but it could happen. It could happen while we're having this discussion.
But if it happens, Michael, it'll happen because Hamas co-locates its weapons capabilities and its military command, its military leaders in these places, in UN-run schools, in hospitals, in other civilian areas. So
tell that to the French government.
I know.
Yeah, tell it to the governments of the world. Tell that to the New York Times.
Yeah, well, the New York Times really stepped in it this week. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
You said we don't have a day after picture of Gaza.
Well, we may. I said, oh, no, I'm saying I hope.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Let me ask you, though, a different question. I
Yeah.
want Saul and I have another book coming out in a couple of weeks, actually. It's about Israeli society.
Yep, I know about it.
Yeah, I know. It's called The Genius of Israel. The subtitle is the surprising resilience of a divided nation in a turbulent world, which is, yes, we argue, as we saw over the last 9 months, Israel is very divided, but don't bet against the resilience of Israeli society. Obviously, we didn't anticipate there being a war, but even before the war, we believed that Israeli society would build back and there would be incredible solidarity. And some of the building blocks that we describe in the book, I think you're starting to see play out already, and I think you're going to see play out soon after the war. You say no day after plan that you know of for Gaza. What about a day after? What does the day after look like for Israeli society?
Well, let me say, if you have a chance, put a postscript in, because your thesis has been exemplified, 100 times over. I mean, everybody's out in volunteerism. I heard a radio program today where they have so much food in the South donated to soldiers, they have no place to put the food anymore. It is just this massive, comprehensive outpouring of love for this country. And the posters.
From all walks of life.
All walks of life. Everyone has put aside our differences. And this crazy, ironic silver lining to this war is that Hamas has reminded us who we are. Hamas has reminded us the very hard way that we are a nation, we are a people, we are a family, and we're acting like a family. Israel has, it's been said that the United States has a weak society but strong institutions, and Israel has a very strong society and weak institutions. And I think this has also been very much demonstrated during this period, the weakness of our institutions vis-a-vis, in contradistinction to the strength of our society. And the big challenge is going to be whether the society can remain united, and we're always seeing fissures here and there, and whether that strength can anyway be instilled in the institutions. And many of these institutions are going to, as I said earlier, it's going to have to basically be rebuilt. The covenant is going to have to be rebuilt. And it's going to be changes in the Army. We already have senior commanders saying they're going to take responsibility, which is code for I'm going to resign when this is over. The defense minister today, Yoav Gallant, said, I'm taking responsibility. Everyone's waiting to see what Netanyahu does, whether he's going to take responsibility. A poll came out to say that today they said 80% of Israelis expect Netanyahu to take personal responsibility. And we know, go back to your comparison with the Yom Kippur War, the government of Golda Meir succeeded in sort of rolling the responsibility for that failure onto the army. And I'm pretty sure many politicians are going to try to do this again, saying, listen, the army told us everything was okay. Well, what do we know, But public opinion will, I think, react the same way they reacted to the Golda Meir government, in that they simply brought it down. And if you think there were protests before the war, wait till you see what happens after.
Before we let you go, Michael, you were Israel's ambassador to the United States. You have been a keen observer of the U.S.-Israel relationship going back decades. A core tenet undergirding Israel's Zionist national security philosophy, strategy, has been that Israel expends its own blood for its own security, and the wars it finds itself in, it will obviously receive and depend on American munitions and funding, but it will be Israeli lives that do the fighting. Do you worry at all, or can imagine a scenario where that doctrine is modified or evolves in this war if suddenly Israel finds itself in a multi-front situation?
I don't have to imagine, it's already happened. Last night, the USS Carney, a destroyer in the Red Sea, took down 3 Houthi rebel made-in-Iran missiles that were, cruising toward the state of Israel. So the United States has already used its military power to defend us. And, that has not happened, to the best of my knowledge, since the 1991 Gulf War, when we had Patriot missile crews here in the streets of Tel Aviv. And as I said, no one's telling those, no Israelis are telling those aircraft carriers, it's okay, bye, we don't need to.
Yeah,
bye,
we're all good.
We're good. We got this, all right? No one's saying that.
Yeah, but you could argue those aircraft carriers are, yes, they, those aircraft carriers are more for deterrent effect, but it's a whole different ballgame if American military personnel are somehow directly in the fight with lives being lost.
But I think that is a very real scenario. So let's play it out. I had an article in the Hebrew Press last week that suggested that maybe we should contain Hamas and focus on Hezbollah, because Hamas is not going anywhere, and Hamas and Hezbollah poses a threat that's 15 times as large as Hamas, much bigger, strategic threat, not a tactical threat. And we're going to come to blows with Hezbollah anyway, and Hezbollah will probably intervene in this war once Israel is deeply, bogged down in Gaza and exhausted. Then Hezbollah will act. You don't send 2 carrier groups, and I've been to these carrier groups. You're talking about massive, military power armadas. You don't move them there unless you intend to use them in some way. Because if you don't use them, it's even worse, right? And it's like taking out the pistol. If you're not willing to shoot it, don't take out the pistol. And remember, America is a superpower. It has a global perspective. And the message there is not just to Iran and Hezbollah. The message there is to Russia, to China. All right. It's about Ukraine. It's about Taiwan. It's about the South China Sea. It's about many things. This is Joe Biden taking on the one issue in Washington which achieves bipartisan support, which is isolationism. It's amazing. He's basically saying to the world that America is back. If Hezbollah opens up with 150,000 rockets at us, and many of them are accurate, they can take out our essential facilities, our utilities, our airfields, our oil refineries, our Dimona reactor, okay? Those aircraft carriers are gonna launch. And it's not just planes; it's Tomahawk missiles, it's Aegis systems, they're an arsenal in themselves, they're armies. So you ask me, is there a chance? Yeah, there's a chance. I can't assign a probability to it, but I would actually say high. So we have woken up to a different world. We are in a very different world right now. We don't know. We know how the war started. We have no idea how it ends. We can only do our best to plan, to gird, to find strength within our society. This is what we can do. And I'm, whether as a person who's lived here for many years, but also as an historian, I'm optimistic. We will overcome this. We will win it, but it will not be easy, and it will not be cost-free.
All right, Michael, thank you for that. There was a lot of really important lessons on a range of topics in this conversation. So in most of these conversations I've been having since October 7th, we've zeroed in on one topic. I feel like here we covered 25.
Really, we can go on. The night is young here. It's only 11.
It's only 11. Are the rockets still flying right now?
No, we haven't had one tonight so far, but I've got a ringside seat out this window. They're saving up for that rainy day. As we start going in on ground, they're going to start really hitting us very hard.
Yeah. Okay, we will keep in touch. Obviously, I'd love to have you back on as things develop. You're a calm, important, and informative voice. So please stay safe, and thanks as always.
Always best. Thank you for your support. Be well, everyone. Bye.
That's our show for today. To keep up with Michael Oren, you can follow him on X. He's at Dr. Michael Oren. And remember that our next episode will be with Matthew Levitt, discussing the potential for a battlefield in the North. Call Me Back is produced by Lon Benatar. Until next time, I'm your host, Dan Senor.